What's up YouTube? This is Trey, rare plant hobbyist, fan of exotic plants. Wanted to talk to you guys today about how to make a cheap moss pole. And so that's really what we're going to get into. I've got all my supplies here. We're going to cover the items, and those of you that know me personally know that I'm pretty cheap and that I like to do things at a discount and have high quality at the same time. So that's kind of what we're going to get into. Alright, so let's do a quick rundown of the supplies that we have that we're going to utilize today. So first thing is this piece of plastic. I wouldn't quite call it polycarbonate. It's more like a nice flimsy plastic that actually it came with an order that I had received as an import order overseas. The particular company that had shipped with this had used it in a form kind of like this. And then they stuck it around the plant to kind of protect it so that it was safe. But I figured we would repurpose this and utilize it for our moss pole today. Another item is a shish kebab stick. You can buy like a package of like 50 or so for extremely cheap. So we're going to be doing this one on a budget. You're also going to need a pair of scissors. Doesn't need to be anything special. Doesn't need to be what you utilize to cut your plants with, because we're not cutting plants. We're actually going to be cutting the plastic with that, so nothing special there. Some thread. I would probably prefer to use fishing line because it's see-through, but a nice white thread, not a big deal. It's going to work. It's going to suit the purpose that we're looking for, so we'll be utilizing that. And then some twine, or some, twine basically is what it's called, plant twine. I like this particular kind because it has the cutter built into it. So go up in there, show it to you, clip it, cut it, well, almost there. Maybe that's why it was on discount. We'll try it one more time. So get it in there nice and tight, then clip it and snap it off. There you go. Easy to use. Very friendly. We're going to utilize just a little container to house our sphagnum moss in, because we're going to need to soak our sphagnum moss before we put it onto our moss pole. And the reason for that is just so that you can get a nice even saturation. It also will help with actually getting the moss onto the moss pole in a nice uniform fashion. Moss is really kind of messy, and now that I think about it, being that it is messy, I should probably have something that I should be doing this on. There's a nice tray that I like to use from IKEA. In fact, if you hold on one second, I'm going to go ahead and grab that and utilize that. I know that there's some that a lot of people make that have little snaps on the ends, but this tray was probably like $2 or something like that. Super cheap, just spray it off, and it's done deal. Easy to clean. So hold on, we'll be right back. I'm going to grab that tray. Okay, and just like magic, we are back. This is the tray that I was referring to. You can actually pick this up at IKEA. I don't remember the exact cost, but I do remember that I really like it and it's cheap, and I probably will pick up another one when given the opportunity. Lights just shut off. Everything's shutting off right now. It's kind of late at night, but that's fine. I have a slide-out shelf that I use in the grow tent, and I could actually easily set this on it. Creates a nice smooth surface so that I have the ability to put things on it that might fall otherwise, because the shelf itself has the, it's one of those IKEA shelves that are the silver shelves. Maybe I'll post a picture of that, but this is not a commercial for IKEA, so we'll move forward. All right, another thing that you're going to want is some type of solution. You could probably just use water if water is your thing, but I like to use a solution that has some rooting mix in it, because the goal of this whole process is actually to activate the nodes that are on the plant that you're going to be utilizing. And for me specifically, the purpose of this is really going to be so that I can get these to grow out, so that when I propagate it, what will happen is it will root a lot easier than if I didn't before. And as you can tell from this particular plant, I believe this is a Scindopsis silver hero. I like to call it Scindopsis, but it's actually Scindopsis silver hero. I believe that with this particular plant, it's really ready to be propagated, and I'll probably take a few cuts off of it, but it would be nice to have it pre-rooted, because Scindopsis, for me, for whatever reason, they don't typically root very well. unless they have some roots started, and even then they still don't root very well, so I'm hoping to get a little bit of a head start on that. Alright, so that is the goal. Obviously we're also going to want to have some moss. I recommend some nice high quality sphagnum moss. There's some sphagnum moss that is out there that's not very good. I don't get any type of endorsement for this, but I do want you to use a product that's going to work, and I don't want to have you using a product that I don't like, for the simple fact that it might not work as well, or you might not be satisfied with it. So I'll share what my preference is. I don't get any type of kickback from that. Maybe I should work on that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I made one similar, and I used tape, and I also used some zip ties, but I don't have tape and I don't have zip ties, and so we can pause it and then be right back just like magic. So here we go. Okay, here we are back. We've got some zip ties. I would really recommend buying these in bulk. I was in a pinch, and so I picked these up at Home Depot, and I got the smaller package, but the larger package is not a whole lot more, but you get a whole lot more for your money when you buy the larger package. So definitely once payday rolls around, I'll be picking up a larger package of these. Basically what the zip ties look like, it's the really small form. Try and get right up in there so that you can see it. It's the type of zip tie that we may use. I'm not sure if we're going to use zip ties for this particular application, because I think we're going to use tape and we might use the twine, but I wanted to have that on hand so that we didn't have to have too many interruptions with the video. Got the tape, so we'll be utilizing that. Just regular tape. Really, it's only going to be to hold everything in place until we get everything situated. And then once we've got everything in place and situated, it's probably not going to have much purpose after that. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So the very first thing that we're going to do is make it the size that we want. I've already folded this in half. So basically what we're going to do, excuse the little that's on there, is we're going to fold it in half, make a small crease, and then we're going to cut that in half so that it's duplicated. And really the only reason for that is to give it some added strength. And I'm not real sure that you need a lot of added strength, but what I'm guessing is that the, what is it called? The shish kebab stick is not going to go all the way up to the top, because obviously the shish kebab stick is shorter than the piece of plastic. And so we want to have a little bit of strength just for the purpose of being able to hold the plant as it grows to the top. So this piece, we'll discard that, use it again later, some other time. And really the only piece that we want to utilize is a little strip just like this. And it's kind of dirty, but that's really not going to matter. And then what I'll probably do is just kind of fold it so that create like a, not a full crease, but a minor crease in there. Kind of like that, because that's going to be where you're going to hold your sphagnum moss inside of there, and then we're going to probably tape it off on the edge just a little bit, maybe a little bit up top and a little bit down bottom, so that we can make it so that this fold doesn't actually open back up, because we're only going to use that. And then plus what's going to happen is, because of it having this bend in here, it's going to create some added stability and some added strength. Because of that bend, that crease is going to create strength from it bending backwards or bending forwards, basically. Not a whole lot of strength, but just enough really to hold the plant. But the next step is really going to be to figure out, okay, so about how much of this pole do I want to be exposed to the water, or how far down into the cup do I want it to go? So if we take the cup like right there, we stick it down in there like that. How far into there do I want it to go? And then at the same time, how much of the height is going to secure the length of the actual moss pole. And so halfway looks pretty good. Keep in mind that you don't want to have too much moss going down too much into the bottom, because you don't want it to get extremely wet. It's going to be there just to keep it moist for the roots per se. And then in this particular case, let's move this around. We'll probably put it like that. So in this particular case, that right there is probably going to give us plenty of room to grow some excess roots, as well as grow out the plant a little bit more before we propagate it. All right, so I think that looks and feels pretty good. Let's go ahead and run with that. Just kind of get a little gauge on it. I might bring it down just a little bit more. So the next step is going to be, what are we going to do to secure the shish kebab stick to the plastic? And honestly, I'm thinking tape is going to be a good way to go, but this is where I'm also feeling like I'm probably going to incorporate probably a couple of the zip ties. So I'll probably do like one, oh, wrong finger, probably do like one right there, and then do one right there, and then we'll secure it with some tape to hold it in place, and that will be the way to go. Alright, so I'm going to stop talking and start working and see how this turns out, so bear with me here. And I don't have an owl. You know, an owl is usually like a hole punch thing, and I probably should have grabbed a knife, and so I wouldn't recommend doing it this way, but I need to make a hole. So what I'm probably going to do, I'm going to take the center point of this, and then I'm going to use some scissors, and then I'm going to use the scissors to poke it into the center of the hole, and hope that that's kind of safe. Alright, so let's go ahead and knock that out. Got our scissors here. There we go. I'm going to punch a hole in either side. Try not to make the hole too close to each other, otherwise what's going to happen is it's going to basically make one big hole because combined, and so we definitely don't want that. So, and I don't know if I'd recommend doing this way. It doesn't exactly seem super safe, but it worked for the most part. I think I'm off a little bit on that one. Maybe we'll make a third hole, and hopefully we won't make one big hole. Let's see what happens here. Okay, there we go. Alright, so then we're going to take a couple zip ties. Recommendation would be to make it so that the locking mechanism on the zip tie, there's the camera right there, so that the locking mechanism is on the back side of the moss pole. I don't know why I feel that way. It probably doesn't matter. In fact, it's probably cleaner of a look if you do it the other way. Maybe I'll switch that around. Yeah, I am. We'll make it so that it's the other way around. I don't think it really matters, but it'll probably be a cleaner look from the back side if the locking mechanism is hidden by the sphagnum moss. So we're going to do an audible right there midstream and get this locked in here. Try and get that zip tie in there nice and tight. I don't know a good way to get it as tight as possible, but you know, whatever works for you, I suppose. And we'll clip the end off, and we'll do the same thing in the bottom. Grab another zip tie, again making sure that the locking mechanism is in the front. Bringing that up, sliding it back through. Like that. And locking it in. You could probably use like a pair of pliers or something and really get a good pull on that. I'm not going to be so concerned about it for this particular moss pole, just because this is kind of like a practice session, learn as you go type of thing, and it feels like it's in there pretty tight as well. But if you really wanted to get a nice good tug on it, you could get some pliers and clamp it down like right here, and then pull on it and probably get probably another couple notches or so out of it. But I'm feeling like this is pretty good. I mean, obviously it's not going to go anywhere. It's got some really good pull on it. So we're good there. And then we're going to clip that off. And already you can kind of see that our moss pole is starting to take shape. So there we have that right there. All right, next step is probably going to be let's go ahead and start getting our sphagnum moss wet. And again, I like to use, as you can see, this is not clear water. Get my face out of there. Or in there, whichever way you want to look at it. So as you can see, this is not clear water. This is more of a rooting solution. And again, like I was saying before, the reason that we want to use a rooting solution as far as soaking the sphagnum moss is it gives the ability for the roots or the aerial roots to really start to take effect and start to activate, because you want to activate those rooting nodes. And I don't know if I'd even call them aerial roots. Maybe we just call them roots, because what happens is when they activate, they become aerial roots or they become root roots. And we want to create root roots that are going to tie, they're going to clamp onto the sphagnum moss, because those are the roots that we're going to utilize in order to propagate, stick it in water. You'll find as we move forward with other sessions that I do for YouTube that I like to water root. And so we're going to kind of get a jump start on the water rooting of these nodes. All right, so having said that, next step is going to be, I'm just going to pour some water in here. And I don't know how much sphagnum moss this is going to take. Honestly, I'm just going to put some water in here, put some moss in here, and just kind of go from there. And then what will happen is the sphagnum moss is going to soak up this water, and it's going to get all nice and moist and wet. And then from there, we will have something to utilize to create our moss pole. And then one thing that's really important as well is squeezing out the water from the moss pole. You don't want it to be soaking wet, but you want it to be nice and damp so that it is able to be malleable and usable, and you'll have the opportunity to not have it dripping everywhere at the same time. All right, so there's that. So we'll kind of set that aside for a second. We've got our thread ready to go. So the purpose of the thread really is going to be to hold the sphagnum moss in place while it's on the moss pole. You're not really going to see it very much. Again, it would have been nicer to have used like some fishing line, because that's more transparent or clear. But we're going to utilize what we have, and we know that it works. So yeah, work with what you got. Don't spend a lot. That was interesting. Rhymed. It works. All right, so next step, we've got our moss pole in place, and we're going to put our sphagnum moss on our pole. And again, like I said, we're gonna just kind of squeeze it out, because there's a lot of excess water in there. We don't need all that excess water. And then it's also going to give us an opportunity to kind of shape our sphagnum moss to the way that we want it, because it's going to just sit right in that pole like that. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to continue. I'll move this into the back. Maybe I should move the angle down a little bit so you can see it. All right, let's do some adjustment. Adjustment in action. Right here in play. There we go. That way you can kind of see what's going on there. All right, so now we're going to squeeze a little bit more out. Just dripping that out of there. Looks like we've got a piece of leca, a piece of pumice, but that's okay. Those are good things. Okay, so we got that there. Squeezing out more water. And kind of like what I was saying before, is this moss now is going to have this rooting solution built right into it. So as the plant attaches to it, it's going to have some good nutrients to attach to, and the nutrients are going to be root enhancing nutrients. Have to excuse my chair. That's not what it sounds like. It's actually just the squeaking of the chair. Okay, so we got that going on there. Alright, so now what we have is our moss pole. It's pretty much ready to go. And the next step is really going to be to thread it up. And in all honesty, I think the only part that we're probably going to use for this, as far as the tape goes, is we'll probably just use the tape to tape the moss pole to the outside if we decide to. And I'll explain a little bit about why I would tape the moss pole to the outside versus on the inside. And it really has everything to do with the type of material that you're utilizing for the moss pole. So, like before, I explained that this is just a shish kebab stick, right? Shish kebab sticks are made of wood, and wood has a tendency to rot. Now, when you stick this pole inside of here, if it rots, what's going to happen is it's going to cause some rot inside of your container. I really have a dislike for any type of contamination that has the potential ability to come in contact with my roots. And so in that case, there's a couple ways that I've gone about preventing that. One of those is by putting some tape around the outside of the moss pole itself where it comes in contact with the water, which slows the rate in which it's going to root. And in this case, I'm probably going to propagate it before it has the opportunity to rot. And the other option is to utilize the tape and actually tape it to the outside of the cup like that, which also works. We might even want to like poke a hole in the top and then run it down in there through the outside, and then just tape like the bottom piece. And that may be the way that I actually end up going with this, because it's going to create more stability, as well as it's going to give us the opportunity to not have to worry about how long it sits in there, because I don't know how, like I said, these Synopsises, sometimes they take a really long time to build a strong root system as far as like the bottom rooting goes. And so I don't know how long it's going to take for these roots or these nodes to activate. And so I might actually even go that route. So we'll show you what that's going to look like if that's the direction that we're going to go. We might have to adjust where this sits inside the cup and bring it back a little bit so that it sits up against that moss pole. But we'll see what we do with that. All right, moving on. So now we've got our sphagnum moss. Our sphagnum moss is on our pole. It's ready to go. It's ready to be wrapped up. Let's see how this works out. I'm not going to pull out a certain amount of thread because I want to be able to just continue to wrap it up as much as I need to as far as wrapping around the pole. What I am going to do though, I know it's just spur of the moment. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to stick the thread inside of there so that as I'm pulling it out, it's not going to go all over the floor, but it's going to give me the ability to use as much as I need to. And I think what we'll do is we'll just I'm going to leave some excess in the top, because I'm probably going to need to come back and like tie that off basically. But for right now, we're going to go like that. We're going to find the end of it, and let's see, hold on, I'm going to start over here for a second. Let's find the end here. There we go. Alright, so this is going to be our end piece, and we want to leave that hanging off there because we don't want to not have the ability to tie it off, because tying it off is going to be important. And because we've got this ridge or this bend in the middle, it's going to have enough strength to support itself. And now we're just going to kind of start slowly wrapping around the sphagnum moss. And it doesn't have to be pretty, you know, plants don't really consider how pretty something is as long as it's effective. So we're going to start wrapping around. Whoa, lost it, but that's okay. We've got it secured enough already, so we're good there. And it might be good to like pinch the top. You know, something I probably should have been doing already is pinch the top two sides. And what that's going to do is create a bend, which will give added strength to help support the weight of the pole as you're winding around the pole. And in all honesty, it doesn't, you know, you don't have to go in any particular fashion. Just make sure that you're doing enough to kind of tighten down the sphagnum moss, and then you can go back through and do an additional round once you've kind of gotten everything in place. And I'm going to switch it around so that I can kind of get a different angle on things and maybe start to wrap in some of this stuff that is over the sides, creating some X patterns, you know, so going like crisscross so that you're able to lock the sphagnum moss in place. And then if you find that you maybe don't have enough up top, like right now I feel like, yeah, I could probably use a little bit more up top, and I don't have any more in there, so we're just gonna grab some sphagnum moss from here, like so. Dip it in there, soak it, get it nice and wet, and drain it out. Put some on there, and then just continue back with our wrapping process, just like that. Might add a little bit more. Drain that out. Add a little bit more like that. And then going back down in that crossing pattern, making my X's. Going down. I'm going to swing it back around like this so that I can catch this side really good. And I want to come back up. It's kind of working our way. I like to twist it back and forth just so that it gives me the opportunity to know which side I'm on and be able to work through each side evenly. And you'll notice that I accidentally got my pigtail or excess thread more so in the middle, but that's okay. That's just going to end up being my new tie-off point. So pull that out. And if you get some that's around the back side, kind of like that was, no big deal. Just pull it off, throw it to the side. Okay, and now we're pretty good. We're at a good point where we can tie it off. So I've got my two ends of my thread, as you can see right there. I'm just going to tie a few knots in there, and that's going to be my tie-off point. Got my scissors here. Cut that off. And we're going to grab both ends. Or remember not to use a squeaky chair next time. You guys probably, maybe, I don't know, maybe you would notice the squeakiness of the chair if I didn't call it out. So maybe I shouldn't call it out, but calling it out because I notice. And so it is what it is. I could probably edit that out, but as you saw from my grow tent video, editing is not yet my forte. Hopefully one day I will make my weakness of editing a strength. But for the most part, look at that. There you go. Got a moss pole ready to go. Looking good. Like a skinny scarecrow or whatnot. Alright, so the next piece that I was telling you about is what we want to do is take our moss pole and determine how we're going to situate it inside the cup in order to have it touch as many of these nodes as possible. So you've got like a node right there, you've got nodes right there, nodes right there, and as we wet the moss pole or spray it with rooting solution, periodically as we're watering the plant, what's going to happen is it's going to come in contact with the moss pole, and the nodes are going to be activated because they're going to be continuously getting the moisture from the rooting solution, and that's going to give us the ability to create some roots and be able to propagate. All right, so high level, just to kind of give you an idea of what it's going to look like. It's going to look something like this, but if you'll notice, there's a bit of a gap right in here, and we've got 1, 2 nodes that are right in there. Now obviously we don't want to disturb the roots of the plant too much, but what we do want to do is get as much of the root in contact, or the node, excuse me, get as much of the node in contact with the root as possible. And there's a couple ways that we could do that. We could move the moss pole forward, but then we lose the stability because it's going to be sitting in the middle. It's not going to have the edge of the cup as a stabilizer, and so that's probably not going to be the direction that I'm going to go. And then actually, ooh, super close, as you can see, just about pierced. Let's see if I can get to focus. I just about pierced that root, so that would have been terrible. But anyways, we want to get it as close as possible, still be able to use the edge of the cup, and either tape it to the outside, or what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to punch a hole right in here and then tape the rest of it to the outside to create a little bit of reinforcement. But in order to do that, I'm going to try and move this back. So right now it's sitting right actually it's sitting quite far away from the edge of the cup. So I'm going to try and move some of this moss out of here, slide it back so that it's closer to the edge without disrupting the root system too much. And then that's going to give me the ability to get more in contact with this first node. And then if I don't get all the way in contact with it, I can always fill that in with sphagnum moss, and then it's also going to work out the same way as if it were on the pole. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to take some of this out of here, and I'm not 100% sure if that's a root. I'm 95% sure that it's not, but I don't want to take too much chance because, like I said, we don't want to disrupt the root system too much. So I'm going to kind of just let that be, and then I'm going to slide it all back. Just really really what I'm doing is I'm just going to take out some of the sphagnum moss from the back, which is going to give me the ability to just push from the front and slide it forward without disrupting the root system. Let's go like this. So now you'll see that I've got a lot of space in the front there, and I've got this potential root, so we're just going to drop that back in there. And now what you'll notice is that we're really up against the edge, so we're good there. I'm going to put this back in here like this. Get some of this excess stuff. A little added moisture is okay. Alright, so now if you look at it, instead of being in the middle of the cup, we're all the way to the end. We didn't really disrupt the root system. The roots are all still happy. Everything is good to go. and we're going to have a lot more contact with our moss pole. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to poke a hole, and this is where things get interesting because this is the part that I've never done before, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to poke a hole right there in our cup. So the hole is right here. All right. And then we're going to take our moss pole, and from the inside, let's see if I can get the right angle on this so we can see this happen. We're going to go in from the inside without stabbing our thumb. Let's see, let me switch hands here so you guys can see it. There we go. In from the inside. We're going to go straight through there and down. So we've got a situation that looks like that. And so now this part right here that would normally come in contact with the water, the moisture, the sphagnum moss, and eventually rot, you're going to have a lot less chance of that rotting because it's now on the outside of the cup, which is a really beneficial thing. And then plus, because we've got it going through this hole here, we're going to have a lot of added stability for the pole. And so we're in a really good place there. And this is where the tape's going to come in, because obviously this is not going to stand up there by itself. It would slide from side to side. But putting some nice clear tape in there is really going to take care of that and make it so that it stands straight and doesn't have any issues as far as sliding from side to side. All right. So let's go ahead and do that piece of it next. We'll just set that right there like that for a second. Okay. And the joy of tape is finding where the end of the tape is. When I'm finding the end of the tape, and I'm sure 9 out of 10 people are watching this that are really going to actually know this, but I should just run my fingernail across it, and you'll find the ridge where the tape is. And once you find where that ridge is, it gives you the option or the opportunity to be able to just pull it apart. So not too difficult. Probably not going to be pretty, but let's go old-fashioned. And then I also like to just kind of make a really messy reappliement of how the tape is on there, so that way next time I'll be able to find it much easier because it's going to be right where all the crinkly area is. That way I don't have to struggle and use my thumbnail to find it. All right, so then we're going to stand it straight up. Make sure that it is lined straight up and down. And then we're going to take our tape and run it across the back side. I'll probably start down bottom. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run 2 pieces of tape on this. So we're going to run it all the way up against it, making sure that it's still straight up and down. Got crease in there, just like that. Kind of tighten it down like that. And then we'll do another piece. Now we've got it to where we can probably even not have to worry so much about it leaning. Just want to make sure that we get it straight. If you're one that's like me and does not like to see a crooked line, looks pretty good like that. So now we're going to make one more line, or one more taped off section, I should say, more towards the top. And here I said that this was going to be easier if I created this crease, but this crease certainly did not help too much. But there we go. All right. Out. Get that like that. And so now what we're going to do is kind of the same thing. Tape on there, and maybe start in the middle this time, and then work our way out on each side, and work our way out like that. Okay, So now we've got our tape in place. Everything looks good. You definitely don't want, well, obviously because of this type of setup, in a water setup, you wouldn't want to fill the water line past where the hole is. But in this particular setup, the way that I usually will water my plants is I'll water it up to the point of the leca, and then let the leca, or let the sphagnum moss weep the water from the leca until it dries out. But if in fact you were to utilize this for water, you definitely would not want to fill it more than the point where the hole is, because it's just going to drain out the back, and it's going to cause your tape to get wet, and then it's going to eventually not be sticky and create a mess. So we're good there. Now, if I really wanted to, and I thought that this was going to be in here for long term, then what I could do is I could do another zip tie through the ends of the plastic, maybe say right here, and then that would give me the opportunity to zip tie it in and lock it in just in case I lose my tape or whatnot, but I'm not really going to worry about that. And then my battery's going to die, so I'm going to pause the video for a second, and we're pretty much done, but we'll pause it so we can talk about it, and so we can get the actual plant up on the moss pole and show you what it looks like when it's completed after we've got it tied in place with our twine. So I will be right back, and I should learn the lesson. Make sure you got a full battery before you start recording a video. Here we go. One moment, we'll be back. Alright, what's up YouTube? We're back in action. Got a little bit of charge. We're about 17%, but I think that's going to be enough to finish the video because we're pretty much done here. So the next step that we're going to go into is going to be getting our plant to attach to the moss pole, and we're going to do that by utilizing some twine. And so we're going to cut off a piece of twine. It's just enough to get around the moss pole and give the plant a little bit of comfortable room. So I would say in this particular case about this much. Good to measure it ahead of time just to be on the safe side. Obviously this stuff can be used for almost anything, so if you don't get it right the first time, it's not really a big deal. Nothing's gonna be lost because you can utilize it somewhere else, obviously. And then we're gonna try and attach it. This first one, probably don't need to attach it right here. So as you can see, because we moved it so far back and we're so close to the moss pole, that first set of node or nodes is really already, actually even the first two are really already up against the moss pole. So when the moisture hits the moss pole, it's definitely going to capture those or get the nodes wet, and so you're not going to have to worry about that. And so where we'll probably start is a little bit further up. And so I'm going to start right about there and start to train it to crawl up the moss pole. So we'll go right about there. Alright, so let's go here like this. I'm going to try and do this backwards so that you can see it. And you don't want to stress out the plant by bending it too much, but you do want to bend it enough to where it does have contact with the pole, because that's the whole purpose of getting it on this moss pole, is making it so that it has contact with the pole. So in this case, here's our node right there, and we're going to just bring it up just a little bit like that in order to get it in contact with the pole. It's probably easier for me to go like that. So let's look at it from this perspective. We got our node here. We're going to bring it up a little bit like that, get it in contact, and we'll be good. So we're going to cut off about the same amount as we did before, and actually I have an extra piece right here, so we're just going to use this extra piece. So what I'm going to do, you're not going to be able to see it as well because I'm doing it against the camera, but I want to make sure I get it right, so we'll go ahead and do that, and then I can just show you afterwards. And if you have extra or excess, not a big deal, not a deal breaker. If you want to cut it off, you can. Either way, entirely up to you. And again, the goal of this particular setup is not really to get it to shingle. You'll notice that there's some plants where it shingles up and down either side. That's really not the purpose here. The purpose here is to activate the root nodes so that when we propagate, it's easier to propagate it and get everything to root faster so that our propagation process is more successful. All right, so now if you take a look at that, look at it from that side, we've pretty much got all of the nodes in contact with the moss pole, so we're good there. And just, you know, I'm actually not going to cut these back pieces off, because let's say that I decided to grow it out or take them off and utilize this for something else. These are going to be longer in length, and so I'm going to leave them just like they are and maybe just push them down, because you don't really see the back piece. What you really see is the front, which is right there, and that's what's important. The back piece, yeah, it's ugly, looks like a girdle or whatever, but you don't see that. You see this. That's what matters. Okay, so we're good there. Next step is to show you what we will do as we water it. So we're going to go through, we're going to water it in this particular case because of the type of medium that I'm using. Again, we'll get some water down into the bottom, usually by just, in fact, let's go ahead and do it right now. So take your little container, or at least what I do is I'll take a little container and I'll just kind of get a little bit of water on that side, and then a little bit of water on that side, like that. And what that was, I think that was my dog, probably Wolfie. You'll see him in a video, I'm sure, at some point in time, or hear him, I'm definitely sure. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of let the water rotate through there, something like that, and then you'll have just a little bit down bottom, not a lot, just enough to kind of start to wick up into there. But that's not what the purpose of the pole is. So the key for the pole is keeping a lot of moisture around the nodes. Now, if you saw my grow tent video, you'll know that I talked about how I liked the Home Depot sprayer nozzle, or sprayer, more than I liked. This is going to be a part where I edit. This is probably going to be edited out because I keep pausing and stopping and not saying anything, but anyways, alright, so you'll probably notice that this is not the Home Depot sprayer, and you will also notice that this particular sprayer does not have the metal plunger, and you'll notice that it does not hold pressure very well. I don't like this sprayer. I really like the sprayer that they have at Home Depot. There's probably others at other companies that are very similar to it, but it seems like every single time that I have to go and utilize a sprayer, if I grab this particular sprayer, I have to pump it, I have to repressurize it, and I've noticed that with the Home Depot sprayer, it's pretty much good to go. It holds the pressure, it holds the air, whereas this one doesn't. It seems like even as I'm pumping it, it's losing air. I don't know if maybe I just have a defective one, but really not a fan. And then plus, this piece right here, the plunger is what I call it. It's not metal, and look at that. It's super flimsy. Not a fan. But I mean, it works. Don't get me wrong. It's doing the job. It doesn't do it super well, but it does it. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to just take your sprayer and spray in those areas where the moss pole is going to come in contact with your nodes. And it really doesn't hurt to even, I mean, if you even want to spray like the whole moss pole like this right here and let it just kind of drip down there and soak up, that's not bad either, because then it's going to have some moisture that it's going to hold in there. And then what I've learned from watching others is every time you go to water your plant or every time you're walking by your plant, have your sprayer on hand, give a few shots to that area and kind of help with that growth process. So that's pretty much it. Covered pretty much everything. I'm not going to ask you to like and subscribe, even though I probably pretty much just did. But what I am going to ask you to do is tell me what your thoughts are. I see people viewing the content, but I don't know what people's thoughts are. And I don't know whether you think this was beneficial, whether this was helpful. Is this the type of video that you would like to see? Or is there some other type of video that you would like to see? Do you want to see our plant collection, kind of like what we've got going on in the background? More on my squeaky chair. No, definitely not my squeaky chair. But anyways, yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. If you like it, if you have some suggestions, some tips, some constructive criticism, really interested to hear what your thoughts are. Feel free to leave them down in the comments. Hopefully the comments are down there somewhere, and we'll kind of go from there. So in the meantime, thanks so much. Appreciate you taking the time to spend this time with me. I'm going to go ahead and jump into some editing, and we'll go from there. Total price of this moss pole, man, 50 cents, 25 cents, not very much. Save money, spend it on plants, not other stuff that isn't necessarily necessary. Not that plants are necessary, but plants are fun. Okay, enjoy, appreciate it. Until next time, YouTube. Now, maybe this will make it into the cutout clips. Where is my pen so that I can stop the video? Alright, there we go. And pause. Just a few little snips. Here we go.
Cooking soul,